Now, I met Mhorag Doig in her capacity as the person who heads up the careers program at London Business School. And we only spoke for 10 minutes. And straight after that conversation, I ran out to Zoe and said, we've got to get Mhorag on the podcast because her energy and her passion for all things career related really shone through. So as well as her London Business School work, Mhorag's involved with a number of startups. She's got a portfolio career that includes Careeriosity, which is one of the coaching and career-based programs she offers. So she's got some great perspectives on the new world of work, on how to help yourself if you're going through a big career transition or how to understand what you want. So this is a really content-packed session and conversation here that you're going to get a load of takeaways from. So grab your pens and pencils, get ready to take some notes. Without further ado, let's get into the next episode of the Executive Career Jump podcast.
You're listening to the Career Jump podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew MacAskill.
Hello, welcome back to the Executive Career Jump podcast. I'm your host, Andrew MacAskill, and I'm really excited today to be joined by Mhorag Doig. How are you doing, Mhorag?
I'm very well, thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.
No, thanks so much for freeing up your time. So you put out a post recently that really caught my eye, and it had a quote on it. And the quote was, "Love what you do, find your crew." Mm-hmm. Now, why did you share that? And what's kind of the sentiment behind it?
There's really two things that sit behind it. So I've been really fortunate recently to start and get involved with a new startup in the group coaching space. I'm so passionate about creating spaces for people to come together to learn from each other and discuss their career challenges. And Crew's a startup that aims to do that through the medium of career coaching. So it's kind of two sides to it. The find your crew piece is that we build crews of 6 people that can come together and they go through a 9-week program that's underpinned by design thinking to help them really rediscover what it is that they want from their careers and kind of bounce ideas off each other and prototype new things. But I'm also really passionate about, as I've said, that idea of people drawing on the support and advice and guidance and experiences of others. And I think it's so important not only to love what you do, but to do it with people that you chime with, that where you feel that you can bring value to them and they bring value to you and you're always learning. And that to me is what a crew is all about. You know, it's having that support network around you that you can draw on in that way.
Absolutely love it. So just for context then, for our listeners, tell us a bit about Mhorag's career and how that's developed and what you get involved with now.
Sure. So I suppose the first thing to say about my career is it's been one of those that certainly might look linear, but did not feel so. I started out early on in my career. I knew that I didn't want to go into a traditional graduate recruitment program after university. I knew that really early on. Was flicking through the newspaper because we did used to look for jobs in newspapers back in the day. And I saw an advert for a boutique recruitment consultancy in Scotland that was just setting up. And I thought, what a great opportunity to not only specialize in an area and learn a job, but also just watch a business grow and develop and really understand how we operate an organization, how we grow it, how we build customers and how we meet a need in the market. So I went into recruitment. I didn't really know what it was at the time, I'll admit, I'll hold my hands up. But being a people person, it just seemed to be an absolute natural fit. So I started there, specialized in recruiting in the investment management space, and then moved into executive search. So I wanted to do a little bit more project management based, a little bit more senior roles, working more closely with fewer clients in a more in-depth way. So I spent a lot of time kind of working in that recruitment space, both as an external talent acquisition partner for our client organizations, but also working with individuals on how they wanted to progress their career. And that parlayed really well into a move I made into higher education. So I wanted to expand my experience a little bit beyond that recruitment process and into learning and development. You know, what makes us tick? How do we learn? How can we think about career hygiene and making sure we're on top of all the things that are going to help us thrive and move our careers forwards? So I moved to the University of Edinburgh, where I was in part of a new team that helped set up the professional development programs for our exec MBA students, our executives and our MBA students, which was really, really interesting. We did loads of great work there. I then spent some time in Zurich, where I moved back into exec search, specifically within the HR space, because I felt that if I was going to have conversations every day with people, I wanted them to be about what was happening at that cutting edge of learning and development. You know, what does talent management mean in the modern day? So it was a really fortunate role to move into, and doing it from Zurich as well, where there's just so many great organizations have their European headquarters. So I got some great exposure to C-suite ideas and talent management programs that were really kind of forward thinking at the time. And then the entrepreneurial bug got a bit too much for me. So I left that role and set up a prop tech startup, again at that kind of intersection of people and opportunity. And it was geared towards helping people find workspaces that they could thrive in, and thinking about activity-based working. Where can we be at our best? If we're collaborating, what kind of space and tools do we need? And then the bug of higher education bit me again, and LBS approached me, and I moved back to London, into London Business School, and I have since been working on the Alumni Career Strategy for all the alumni that go through LBS. I devised a program that they can come back to the school for continued support on. That's on top of some of the let's call them side hustles that I'm involved in, one of which is Crew, that we've already talked about. And I also do a bit of exec coaching myself through my own brand, Careeriosity.
Careeriosity I like as well. We'll get onto that. I have questions on the journey, if that's okay. So you mentioned when you came out of education, you knew you didn't just want to go the traditional route. Mm-hmm. Can you just expand a little bit more on that for us? Like, what was the thought process? Why didn't you want to go the traditional route?
Yeah, I think there was two things really that stick out to me when I reflect on it now. And one was that I have quite a creative brain. I'm quite an ideas person. And the idea of, after having 4 years really structured education, the idea of having another 2 years where it was a really structured program, it just didn't feel like it fit at the time. And as I mentioned, I also had this real desire to lift the lid on how businesses operate. I'd studied business studies, and I felt that in a smaller, high growth organization, I'd be right at the coal face. I'd not only be learning how to do a job, but also how to run a company from some really, really fabulous people. And I credit them, actually, the founders of Core Asset Consulting, to date, with my intellectual curiosity, always asking questions, because I think that, in order to keep learning, you have to kind of have that curiosity that backs you up. And I felt that was the kind of environment I was going to thrive in. And I was really lucky to be able to make that decision at the time.
No, excellent. And really good self-awareness there at quite a early age. So I think having that kind of self-awareness at an early age is fantastic. I think too many of us just kind of go along with what's expected. I know I certainly did, and many of my peers did. And 4 years or 5 years or 10 years later, then everyone starts pivoting and actually getting that self-awareness. So well done for having that early. The time in Zurich, we're big fans of people spending time overseas, working in their career. I'm wondering, what do you feel that you learned as a result of that experience, or developed as a result of the experience of working in another country?
Gosh, so much. I mean, I had studied French alongside business studies at university. And so I always knew that I wanted to spend time abroad. I'd studied abroad and I had done work experience abroad, but I hadn't actually immersed myself in another culture and really worked there. So it was always a driver for me anyway. I think you get this really kind of interesting sense of global citizenship when you work abroad. A really acute understanding of just the nuances of different cultures and working with really different kinds of people. And that was quite eye-opening for me. The other thing that was really interesting was, having studied French, I don't know how this happened, but I somehow found myself in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. And I guess it was a bit of a wake-up call as well, insofar as my career had progressed really nicely up until that point. And I thought, well, I've been successful so far, I can be successful anywhere. And even though I'm a linguist by study, I hadn't thought through just how difficult it would be to find and work in a role where I wasn't fluent in the language of the organization and the local and the locals. And so, it was really quite eye-opening for me that it's really important to take note of the context that you're working in, the people that you're working in, what's important to them, the cultural nuances, as I've mentioned before, and the fact that it goes so far beyond the technical skills of what you do in a role that mean that you can be successful. And so it was a steep learning curve, but a really important one, I think, for me to go through.
I don't meet many people that have regretted it.
Don't regret it in the slightest.
No. Don't
regret it in the slightest. I mean, in addition to having a great opportunity in a blue chip executive search firm, I was also rebuilding a life in a new country and trying to make friends and all sorts of things that I think sometimes we take for granted, having that support network around us that we've built over many years, suddenly not having that there, having to draw on digital technologies to reconnect with people consistently and get really purposeful about that. Those were all huge things. And obviously the skiing at the weekends helped as well.
Yeah, very good fun. And yeah, you were unleashing your curiosity again.
Mm-hmm. Let's put it that way.
We like that. Okay, let's switch lanes a little bit then. I'm aware of the expertise and the work you do in helping people with their own careers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people that listen to this podcast tend to be in some kind of career transition. So either they're in role and looking to move, or they might find themselves on the job market. Interested to hear what advice you'd have for people who are listening in who find themselves in transition in one way or another.
I think, first of all, the most important thing is give yourself a break. Any job change is difficult. It's challenging. You're reevaluating, you're reflecting. That all takes time. Draw on your support network as well. Make sure that you have, really robust, I call it a board of advisors, a close group of people that you can call on to test your assumptions and test out the questions that you're asking yourself about your transition. I guess the second piece that, particularly in my role, I do see quite a lot working with executives now is take the time to do your research, have informational interviews, get out there and speak to as many people as possible so that it can be a little bit less daunting, the transition, because you feel more informed. I think that's really, really important. And then the third piece for me is something that I think is not transition inflection point specific, but do your career hygiene. So, keep your CV up to date. What do you want people to know about you? Think about, what are the 2 or 3 key points that make you stand out as an individual? It's not about what you do often in transition. It's about how you do it. How do you lead? How do you work with others? How are you growing and cultivating your emotional intelligence? Do you have a growth mindset? Keep all these things in the back of your mind. And then it becomes less about the difficult tactics of moving from one thing to another and more about a journey of exploration, really. And I think if you approach it that way, bring it back to curiosity as well, is it becomes a much more enjoyable experience. So research, give yourself a break and draw on your network.
No, I like that. And you're reframing that as a more positive evolution into the next chapter and a discovery exercise.
Exactly.
Which is reframing that anxiety of being in transition more as excitement of what might come next.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Very, very good. Board of advisors. That's a new one for me in a career perspective. Tell me about what a good board of advisors looks like for somebody in their career and what the makeup looks like. Tell me about that.
Sure. And I think it's useful to just give a bit of background to that. So I think networking and building a network can feel quite a sort of nebulous thing out there, and just adding people to your network often is perhaps counterproductive. So the board of advisors concept is something we talk about a lot in LBS as well, and it's thinking about the kinds of people you have in your immediate network that can support you in your career development. Often there are a couple of different key types of individual you would want to have in that board of advisors. A coach, not necessarily an executive coach or a formal coach, but someone who can coach you through your self-reflection process. It gives you the space to find the answers yourself. A mentor, someone with some technical skills and expertise that you aspire to or that you know is important for you to build, so that you can get a view on how would this person have faced this challenge? How can I keep growing and learning in terms of my technical skills and how I do my job? You need to know some decision makers, whether you're making a career transition or accelerating within your own organization. You do need to be aware of the kinds of people that are going to either be barriers to that or supporters of that. Cultivate those relationships appropriately. You also need to have a great network of peers as well, because you can't be in all rooms at all times. And so drawing on information from people who are on parallel tracks to you or the same track as you is really useful, just to round out your understanding of what's going on in different functions, different industries. That will help, I think, when you're trying to navigate your own career landscape. So there's a couple of different roles I would say are really, really key to have in your board of advisors. And those are probably the key 4.
Yeah, it's a fantastic concept. It really is. I like that. And I think definitely on the mental side, history tells me sometimes it's quite good to have somebody that will give you a little bit of tough love and and call you out when you need it. It's quite easy actually to surround yourself by people that are very supportive, and that's important too, because as you said earlier, it's a stressful situation, but having that one person that you trust enough to hold the mirror back up to you and call you out, I think is invaluable. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, at one point when I was working at Edinburgh University, I occasionally got labelled with the tough love lady label. Because I think it is really important to ask yourself those questions and have other people reflect them back at you. Whilst it's important to have agency in your career and you're the only person that can own it, you often can't make career decisions in a vacuum. So it's really, really important to make sure you're drawing on as many sources as possible so that you're informed.
100%. And from a board of advisors point of view, in terms of some people that might be able to connect you with opportunity, I think a lot of executives miss the opportunity to continue to network with people that have worked for them in the past, because they see it as almost going down the food chain. But actually, if you've spent your time developing someone in your career, they will feel such a passion to try and to help you in your moment. It's a massive missed opportunity. I don't know if it's pride, ego, and hierarchies that tend to get in the way of people going to people that have worked with them previously. But I could tell you straight away, there's a couple of bosses I've had in my career that if they were ever to call me for help with anything, I would run through walls to try and help them with introductions and things. So look at it from a 360 point of view, right? It doesn't just have to be, the chairman or the NED or a CEO that you admire, or somebody that's, perceived as further along in their career than you. You can get a really good mix of people that want to help from a 360 point of view.
I 100% agree. I think, we talked a little bit at the beginning about careers no longer being linear or ladders. And, if we take that 360 concept, which we value when it comes to within our organizations and our own development, why would we not do the same thing for our careers? Just to make sure that we are really gathering information from all the possible sources. And, it speaks to the kind of resurgence of reverse mentoring as well. You can learn as much from the generations coming up behind you as you can from looking forwards. It is a danger, I think, that a lot of executives face as we get blinkers on to look upwards rather than all around us. And of course, you are going to miss out on insights if you take that approach.
Totally. Hey, everybody. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but I wanted to tell you very quickly about how Executive Career Jump can help end your career misery. So when you hit our website, there's 3 different ways that our digital resources can help you. For a start, if you're looking to jump in to a new role, we've got the premier online job search course that you're going to find anywhere. There's a number of different memberships to help you understand what you want and how to go and get it in this current environment. So we're here to help you if you want a new career. We've also got a section if you want to jump up in your career. And so this is all about our online leadership hub, which is a platform full of content, includes 2 meetups per quarter and a whole thriving community of leaders trying to become the best leaders they can be. Go and check that out too. And the third area in our website and the other digital course that might help you is our Business Launcher course. So we've created the Business Launcher program that we wish we had when we were setting up on their own. So if you've decided to jump off of the employment stream and start up on your own, make sure you head over and check that out too. You can find all of these resources, a bunch of free content, links to previous podcasts and more at execcareerjump.com. That's execcareerjump.com. Now, back to the pod. So what's some of the best career advice you've had?
Best piece of career advice I've ever had was don't be the best kept secret in your organization. I think it speaks a little bit to what we've just talked about, where you can kind of have blinkers on to think, these are the things I need to do right now to be successful. And these are the 6 people that need to see that. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, some of the most interesting stretch assignments I've received and career opportunities that have been put in front of me have been because I've stepped out of my lane and, looked at volunteering for industry associations or putting out some thought leadership, or even just a simple blog post just to get your name out there, because you never really know what's going to come back on that. You put out good things into the universe and good things come back to you. You don't want to be the best kept secret in your organization, because you do then run the risk of missing out on opportunities that are just slightly outside your lane.
So what can people be doing to make sure they're not the best kept secret? I think that's tremendous advice. So build that out for us a little bit. What can they be doing?
Yeah, sure. Because it's really important when you think about that don't be the best kept secret thing. is that, hard work within your organization, can pay off. It's important to work hard. But the critical thing, I think, comes back to curiosity, looking outside of what you think, where you might think your opportunities are going to come from. It comes out from networking. It comes out from meeting interesting people. I mean, I'm one of those people that every single conversation that I have, I take a couple of nuggets, and then in the next conversation I have, I might say, well, I just heard this from this guy, and this was so interesting. And it sparks a conversation with someone new. It's like a chain reaction, if you will. And that it grows your influence, it grows your voice and your visibility, not just within your organization, but across your industry or across your function. And it enriches you as well. It builds new skills for you. It can help you build your emotional intelligence. These are all critical things that can contribute to your success in your career.
Totally. Fabulous advice. We love that. There's been a lot of events run recently, Mhorag. I'm sure you've been running some of them with your alumni program, but we've certainly noticed, we've been attending and talking at events and things. It's all about the new normal, or the next chapter, the new world of work. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of rhetoric out there about this at the moment. Interested to see from your point of view, because I know you're in the middle of this career ecosystem. What's your take on the next chapter and how work is going to evolve for us all from here?
Yeah, I've been reflecting on this quite a lot recently, because I think there are a lot of layers to this. But the danger is when we start labeling it as the new working normal. I mean, we do feel comfortable when we put a label on it, but ultimately it's worth remembering that what's normal tomorrow may not then be the day after. And so there isn't this sort of end game that we're all working towards that's going to mean, well, we've nailed work now. The pace of change is just only going to get faster. And, we've spoken about careers not being linear, squiggly careers. And I think this is what's going to characterize work going forwards. It's not going to be job title driven or, clear progression routes within an organization. It's going to come down a lot more to an individual's sense of agency and how they respond to change and how they spot opportunities and seize those. I remember many years ago now, I was at a conference and there was a chap called Ben Kasnoka speaking there. He wrote a book, The Startup of You, with Reid Hoffman. And at the time he was talking about this concept of tours of duty, which is where, as an individual, we would have an open conversation with our employer. We would set a time-bound tour of duty with them around what are our deliverables, what's the value I'm going to bring as an individual, and what's the organization going to give back to me, and how is that mutually beneficial. And then at the end of that period, you come together in a really transparent conversation and you reevaluate. Is my next tour of duty naturally within this organization? Can I keep adding value? Or is it through a move somewhere else? I actually think that kind of approach is what's going to characterize work moving forwards. And you add it into that, this sort of splash of balance and purpose, values. And that's what I think is going to characterize the new world of work. We're going to have much more of a responsibility to ourselves and our own compass, our own career compass, as well as hopefully have much more transparent conversations with our organizations where we're all just aware that this pace of change is so rapid that we need to keep having open dialogue to make sure that whatever we're doing at whatever point, that we're adding value and that people are getting value from the work that we're doing. I think that's what's going to be most important.
It's exciting, isn't it?
I think so.
I do too.
Daunting though, but I think we learn most when we're uncomfortable, don't we? So perhaps we should just approach it as an opportunity.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. As per the Zurich example earlier, that's exactly right. And this idea of being the CEO of your career and managing it in that way, as you describe, and taking that internal ownership rather than being a passenger in your career, I think is an important switch, and the opportunity for that is now. I think companies need to get a lot more pragmatic though, Mhorag, about all of this, because if you believe the latest insights, you're looking at, in the UK, an average tenure of around about 2.6 years. So we need to completely rethink. And I love that tour of duty point, because that's what that is, right? So if we're at an average tenure of 2.6 years, really it's about, right, how can we attract the right people in who meet our values based on future predictors? Then how can we get them up in the organization so that they're performing better and that we make them better than we found them? And then how can we get them out in a way that they leave as an advocate, might boomerang back at some point in the future, and certainly don't damage our employer brand on the way out. And I think if we just look at it as more pragmatically as a period in time where two paths are crossing over and we both leave better as a result, and we're totally comfortable with the fact that it's going to be more transient, then I think that will remove some of the ego and the emotion, and particularly resignations, I think, are dealt with terribly in a lot of organizations. So do you think we can get to a more pragmatic place on the employer side, or what needs to change there? Because I see that as a bit of a barrier. I think we've got a disconnect on both sides of the hiring equation, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think first and foremost, we need to get rid of this view that transient means less value in some way.
Right.
And that it's okay to have these kinds of conversations where, as an individual and as an organization, you appreciate that you may be creating great value for a limited period of time. That's okay. I think the focus should be on outcomes, not output. And so that's one of the areas I think that results in this sort of tension or this opacity in the hiring process that can feel very dysfunctional. I think we can get there. I mean, let's not forget that whatever side of the table you're on, whether you're in an organization and you're a hiring manager or you're in talent acquisition, you're still a human being. And so is a candidate. And so maybe it is just about bringing a bit of humanity back into the process and encouraging interviews to feel more like conversations, and opening it up a little bit to think beyond the traditional kind of organizational boundaries of what it means to do a job and bring value. I think if we can start being a little bit more open-minded about stuff like that, then absolutely we could get there, or at least we can take the first step.
Amen to that. We love that. Getting the human back into human resources. Let's push for that. I think that's exactly where we need to go. Yeah, very good. Very, very good. Thank you for that. I sense as well, I don't know if you sense the same, but I sense there's a lot of people going through a process of trying to work out what they want to do next at the moment, and trying to get to a point of some kind of clarity in terms of what next steps might be looking like. What kind of advice would you have for people in terms of exercises they can be doing, or an approach, as well as getting the board of advisors in? I guess prior to even getting the board of advisors in, it's like, how can they reorientate and research what they're about and what they might want to do next?
There's loads of different things you can do, isn't there? And I tend to think about it in two ways. There's the tactical kind of career management hygiene that we alluded to before. And then there's the continuous learning and the professional development side of things. So when we think about the tactics, we should always be thinking about what our career story is. And that's informed by so many things: our professional identity, our values, our passions, our interests. And I think sometimes we don't spend enough time asking ourselves what those are, and revisiting them every 6 months, probably even more often than that these days, to be honest, to make sure that we know what direction our career compass is pointing in, or what one do we want it to point in. And then I think the professional development piece, for me, it comes down to learning two things: learning and emotional intelligence. I think spending some time to really figure out what makes us tick, our behaviors in the work, how and when do we thrive. And you don't need to be in a job search process or switching careers to do these things, which is what's so great about it. Someone recently described it to me as getting match fit in your career, ready for that moment you're going to step on the pitch and make that step, get involved in a job search process. These are all things that you can just do with 5-10 minutes a day, revisit your CV or listen to a podcast or something like that. I think those kinds of things are really important. We should be making career thinking and reflection a habit, in the same way that we manage our money, in the same way that we manage our health now. We've got apps for everything, but we don't have an app for doing this with your career. So build your own. I'm not saying build your own app, but build your own, exercises and triggers and things that you can do regularly to check in on, to make sure that you're equipped and that you're ready and that you've asked yourself the right questions, so that you can kind of move things forwards as and when you need to.
I love the evolutionary nature to what you've just described. Like it changes, doesn't it? This idea that we plant a vision in the sand for 5 years' time, and then in a very linear way we deliver against that via a plan in our careers isn't necessarily the case. So I really like that. Thank you. You also said about consuming podcasts and things. I think that's super. I found that personally, that you have to consume to create.
Yeah.
And by taking in books, podcasts, videos, whatever, that actually that sparks a lot of your own thoughts in a positive way. I'm wondering what kind of books or content or things have helped shape your own thinking?
Well, loads of it. I'm really fortunate in working at LBS because there's so much great research coming out from our faculty. I mean, recently, one of the things I've enjoyed the most was I was on a session with Dan Cable, who's a professor of our organizational behavior department, talking about gratitude and how important it is to kind of bring gratitude back. I call it the gratitude attitude, and just, how that can help lift our spirits when it comes to you're having a bad day or you're feeling that, your values are slightly out of alignment. So there's great things like that, getting stuck onto webinars where you can hear expert practitioners really kind of dig into the research behind some of this stuff. I'm quite a cerebral thinker, so I quite like to understand, not just what's happening, but what underpins that. So those opportunities are always great, and I seize them with both hands. I mean, for an hour of your day, you can get some nuggets and then take those away. Why not? I was reflecting recently, actually, because I've been packing up my office and trying to move things around, of what books had been the most inspirational to me over the past 6 months. And I realized there's a couple of books I've picked up again and again. One of them is The Squiggly Career, Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis. And when I look through that, it's one of those great books that it's really tactical and practical when it comes to managing your career. But you can pick it up again, a couple of weeks later or a month later. And a little tip from me is the kind of book you need to scribble in. So I scribble in it with one color of pen 1 month, and then I'll pick it up a month later and use a different color of pen. By the time over the last 6 months, I can look back and see how my thinking's evolved. And it's very rare that a book can help you to do that, I think. I also was really, really lucky recently to be given 2 fantastic books. I think they're both, one of them was just released last year, called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. That creativity, that diversity of thought, how it fuels new ideas and solutions. It's really inspirational. And the other was David and Goliath, Malcolm Gladwell, because I feel like particularly the last couple of years, we've all been sitting under this cloud of coronavirus, and it can create a lot of kind of internal tension. It feels like these obstacles we've been facing are insurmountable, and that we're insignificant in the face of a global pandemic. But books like that, albeit was written long before the pandemic, I think can help you reevaluate the obstacles that you're going to face and sort of remind you that there's nothing really that's insurmountable if you give yourself a space, you get the right support network in place, and you ask yourself the right questions. And that's what I really liked about that book.
3 tremendous recommendations there, and by coincidence I have read all 3 as well, which is unusual, so that's really good. We are obviously aligned as career folks, and great shout out for fellow change makers on the Squiggly career side. Love the work that the ladies are doing, and if anybody isn't following them, they should be. Another really good podcast to listen to as well. And I have to say, Rebel Ideas completely shifted my view of the diversity argument. Yep. Not that I was anti-diversity or anything like that in the past. It's just like seeing it in plain sight in terms of how echo chambers are created and how you get groupthink happening and the lack of innovation and cultural advancement that comes as a result of that. It's just, I challenge anyone to read that and then not end up as a big advocate for D&I afterwards, because that's basically what happened to me. What did you think of it in terms of the takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely the same thing. I mean, I would probably hold my hand up and say that after reading that book, I realized I had a relatively narrow view of D&I previously. And the kind of the insights that I got from that it brought it to life for me, insofar as it was the first book I had read about D&I diversity of thinking specifically, that brought it back to the individual and what's going on in our brains, and then how that plays out within an organizational atmosphere, but actually also in our personal lives as well. So I found it really powerful, actually, in helping me rethink how I interact with others, not just then how I felt about D&I, but how I myself operated within a business environment with people who are different than I am. And it made me realize, not made me realize, but helped shine a light on the fact that everyone is different from me. And so I found it really powerful at many levels. Really, really interesting book.
Absolutely. Snap. So final question. You, like a lot of people right now, have managed to get to the point whereby you've almost got, with your side hustles, with the startups you've been involved with, and your day job with the business school, almost like a bit of a portfolio style career going on far earlier than we traditionally think about portfolio style careers, where we have a number of interests. Why have you gone that route? What does that bring to you? And what advice would you have to other people thinking about that structure of having a number of different interests within their career at one point in time?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, I think there's always been a part of me that's operated a little bit like that, to be honest. When I was early on in my career, someone had said to me, what's the third leg to your tripod beyond your personal life, your work life? You know, what else are you doing? And because I was always, you know, had always this appetite for learning, it felt natural to kind of seek out other things to do. I mean, I have quite a lot of energy and it was just going to waste. And so I thought, well, where can I be spending this that not only is going to add value, but it's going to make me feel good and I'm going to learn. And so that's kind of how it's all come about. And I guess, yeah, I've always felt that it's important to seize opportunities outside of the day job. And even everything I do outside of the day job helps me do the day job better too, which I think is something that we're often worried about, is we think we're splitting our focus, but actually it's just enriching how we do things. It can be difficult. I mean, there are a finite number of hours in the day and balance is really important. But I think it's just asking yourself some questions of, if I spend an hour doing this, what's it going to bring back for me? You know, how's it going to pay it forward to others and also bring it back to me? And I kind of lived a little bit by that mantra for a few years now. In terms of advice for other people, I guess I didn't realize that I was doing this until about a year ago, when we had a chap called Jeff Gothelf come and speak at LBS. He's written a book called Forever Employable. In that book, he tells a story about waking up on his 35th birthday and realizing that the world was moving on. And at some point, opportunities would stop finding him because there would be so many great people coming up behind him that they'd find those people instead. So he wrote this book, and in it, he talks about planting a flag. And as part of that, you think, what are some of the things I want to share with people in the world? And what kind of, you know, what do I want people to talk about in rooms when I'm not in them anymore? And not all of that stuff is going to be based on what you do in your 9 to 5 or in your day job. And it really kind of awoke in me this idea actually of a portfolio career and having these side hustles and starting to really bring them a little bit more into focus. Because I also realized that everything that I've talked about today, the pace of change and how important it is to keep learning and network and get out there, all of that has been because this idea of having side hustles or other things going on is enriching, but also is going to help me move forwards, is going to help me adapt to what's happening out in the new world of work, like we've said. I don't want to wake up one day and realize that, you know, I'm stuck. So I'm taking steps now to make sure that that doesn't happen. And also learning every day, which I think is really great. So plant your flag, read that book. It's a great book, Forever Employable. And think about, well, you know, what is it that you want to be known for? And then it doesn't even necessarily need to feel like a side hustle, but start doing some of those things, whether in your organization or outside it.
Yeah, and the enriching nature that you've described there, I think, is a really big missed point. That it can augment what you're doing rather than purely take from it. And that's super important for people to get their head around, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not an either or.
No, there you go. Yeah, it's not binary. Yeah. Brilliant. We only spoke for 10 minutes previously, and I jumped straight onto Zoe and said, I'd really like to get more on the podcast, because I could tell how passionate you were about careers. And as a bit of a career geek out person myself, I could spot another one quite quickly. And I'm really glad that we had you on. You've shared so much value with everybody today. And I've got no doubt that, you know, we've delivered some thought-provoking insights. But for anybody that wanted to potentially follow up with you, find out more about Careeriosity, or follow your content a little bit, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a profile on LinkedIn, which I try and keep as up to date as possible and practice what I preach, so to speak. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. Also take a look at Careeriosity. It's careeriosity.co. And if any of you are interested also, you can see some of the work that we're doing at Crew on joinacrew.com. And, you know, we regularly invite guests to our event and work at LBS. So if anyone, you know, wants to reach out to me through the London Business School community, my profile's on the website, and do feel free. I'd, you know, happy to have conversations with anyone. I think, as you say, when you talk about this kind of stuff and you're passionate about it, and you're passionate about connecting people with opportunity and insights and so on, the more conversations you can have, the better. So take all the opportunities to reach out to me through all the different channels.
Yeah, well, in the spirit of gratitude, we're very grateful for you spending the time with us today, genuinely. Some fantastic insights. Good luck with everything you're doing. And by all means, if you're listening, do reach out to Mhorag. As you can tell, she's very passionate. She's got a lot of value to add. So please do connect with her. Thanks again. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew MacAskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.